Hi, I am Lee Coyne, your host here at Culturama. And if you are fishing for some culture, you have come to the right place. We have with us today a musician named Mike Frazier.
Nice
and
to meet
Mike
you.
hails from a distant place called Newport. But he lived for many years in Salem, worked for Marion County, was born in a place called McMinnville X number of years ago. So let's start with McMinnville. What was it like when you were a little kid? How was it different?
Oh, it was fabulous. I treasure my childhood beyond belief. The fields were green. Always another green field. It was a small town back in the day. There was less than 7,000 people there, I believe, when I was in grade school or junior high, and we lived on a small, quiet street across the street from a farm. In fact, the street right next door to our house was the city limits.
What kind of farm? What were they?
They had cows and sheep, and my friend and I would walk out into the forest back in that area, and there were small streams and a pond, and my dad would take the dogs for walks out there, and it was a great time. I really liked it.
A natural question to ask: were there fish in the farm, in the pond?
There were not any fish in the pond. There were ducks in the pond.
Okay. And what made you move from McMinnville to Salem? Or was there an in-between?
There was an in-between. College was in between. So I went to OCE, as it was called at the time. Now, of course, it's a state college.
Western Oregon?
Yes.
Over in Monmouth.
In Monmouth, right. And I spent a year in Corvallis at Oregon State University. Took a little summer break and moved to Eugene for a while, and then back to Monmouth, finished my schooling, and met a girl and got married. So that's when we moved to Salem.
Good. Let's talk about before OCE. You went to high school in McMinnville?
Yes.
Okay. Were you involved in music at all at that point
I
in
was
time?
not. You know,
What were your interests besides girls, of course?
I got into music in grade school, actually. So in 5th and 6th grade, I played clarinet. And one day, I figured out I couldn't play rock and roll on the clarinet. So,
No way.
So I gave it up and moved on to other things for a period of time. I used to like fishing, hunting. My friend and I had a fur trapping line for a while. That was kind of interesting. I wouldn't do that
That was
today,
before you got into wife trapping.
Yes.
Threw that in for comic relief.
It was fun. It was a good experience.
Good. So back in school, did you play an instrument there, or what was your connection with music?
I really didn't have a connection with music back in school, other than the clarinet in grade school. Okay. I did some sports.
Now, Mike, when you were a little boy, what was your dream? What did you set out to be in your dream of dreams?
I really didn't have a dream. I just went with the flow, figured that something would turn up somewhere and I'd enjoy it, and so that's what I did.
There's a song like that, Que sera, whatever will be, has happened. Okay.
It was kind of like that.
What was your major in school?
I started out with education, and then moved over into philosophy, psychology, and fell in love with philosophy, basically. Took course after course after course until I filled my head up.
Kant, Nietzsche, Sartre, all that stuff.
Lots of world religion, stuff like that.
And did you apply it in some way?
Just to my own life.
Oh, well, that's important.
Yep, how I treat people.
So let me ask you the natural question, do you have a favorite philosopher that you admire, that you kind of follow after?
Just really off the top of my head real quick is Alan Watts is someone I enjoyed reading.
Okay.
D.T. Suzuki.
I bet the public out there doesn't know very much about Alan Watts, so let's take a minute or two to explain his concepts of life and the world around us.
Well, when I was back in school, they had it had just come on the air a couple of years previously to my college education, and it was KINK FM 109 in Portland, or FM 102, I guess.
So I mean the entire staff was kinky?
No, they could have been. I never met them, but anyway, they had an evening show on Sunday nights with Alan Watts, and he would talk about philosophy, and it really intrigued me. I thought that was just fascinating. He was very open-minded about the universe and how people related to each other, and all these different concepts that were new to me. And I really enjoyed listening to that.
So Mike, could you give us one or two examples of how he wants people to relate to each other, so we could kind of be less abstract and more concrete?
Okay. Well, he wasn't grounded in religious dogma. Okay. He was open to all kinds of thoughts and ideas, and people were, in his mind, I believe, people were equal. You treated each person like yourself. So to me, that was an example I strove to be similar to that.
Tell us a little bit about your sports side of the equation.
Well, I played the typical baseball, football, basketball in later grade school.
What position in baseball? Infield? Outfield?
Well, sometimes I was the pitcher, sometimes I was first base. So that was, I hurt my knee in 7th grade and kind of fell behind all the other guys, so ended up falling to the B team, and eventually just kind of quit playing those 3 major sports and took up golf and tennis. And I was pretty good in tennis.
Wow.
Went to state one year.
Yeah, my dad also was a tennis player in his heyday.
Yeah, it was a good game.
Okay, so let's find out how you really got interested in music, because that's the thrust of your career. Once upon a time.
Upon a time.
Go ahead.
I was in Monmouth in college. I was actually just moving into the dormitory.
Yeah.
And so I had an old station wagon. It was full of stuff, and I had grabbed a few items in my hand and gone to the dormitory, unlocked the door and walked in, and from the other side I heard music playing. So it was one of those setups where you had 2 living areas, 2 bedroom areas, and a shared bathroom in the middle. And there were 8 of us that lived in this area, or that would live in this area. So turns out 4 guys were from Klamath Falls, and they were all gymnasts. And I had a couple of my roommates. One was from McMinnville, where I grew up, and a couple other ones from Hillsboro that wanted to be teachers. So it was kind of an interesting group. And but anyway, I walked into the room and I heard music coming from the other side of the room. So I went over there and peeked in the door, and there was a guy sitting on a suitcase playing Simon and Garfunkel song. And so I waited until he was done, and then started clapping and telling him how great I thought he sounded. And he goes, "Oh, do you play?" And I said, "No, I don't." And he goes, "Well, I'll teach you." And I go, "Well, I couldn't learn how to do that." And he goes, "Sure you could, I could teach you." And I go, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah." So I went back outside, I got in my car, and I drove from Monmouth to Salem, went in downtown Salem to the Star Exchange, and bought an old beat up classical guitar for $30, put it in my car and drove back to Monmouth, walked in the dorm room and said, okay, I got a guitar, you teach me. And he sat me down and he said, move your fingers like this. And he got me to play a chord. So that's where it all started for me. And ever since then, I can't put it down.
See, that should inspire some. I see sometimes used instruments being recycled in some of the stores in town, thrift shops, antique shops. And for those of you who have the little inkling yearning to want to play, let that be your present to yourself. Whether you're a mother for Mother's Day, a father for Father's Day, a kid for Kitty's Day, which we have not yet invented. We should. But it's never too late to start. It's never too early to start. I believe Mozart started playing his violin when he was 6 or 7.
Really?
Before my time.
Way before mine.
Yeah. But I did visit Salzburg, where he came from, Austria. And they had his thing in the showcase, his baby guitar, harpsichord, and all that stuff. So, do you remember some of the early songs that you learned to play?
Yes, I do. One of the first songs I learned to play was Wooden Ships by Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And
You still know that?
I used to know that. Teach Your Children, knew that song.
Okay.
There were a few others.
That's one we could do, integrate as part of the show. So listen up, and you'll hear Wooden Ships, as opposed to the Titanic's Last Call. I like to throw that in. And what are some of the other songs? Do you have a favorite, or 2 or 3 favorite sea-related songs that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, I've written a few songs about the sea since I moved to Newport. It seemed like a good way to start things off was to write a few songs about the ocean and go play them at local venues.
Definitely.
And I played a couple times at Oregon Coast Aquarium, which is a wonderful place. If you haven't visited there, I'd highly recommend it. And a few other little hot spots around town. So that seems to glean interest. I've written one song. There's a gentleman over in the Newport area that spends a lot of time walking around town and on Highway 101. So every day he walks for miles. And so one day I was trying to figure out why he did that, and so I wrote a song about my sort of study of his caricature, and people seem to enjoy that song anyway.
So maybe we could add that to the repertoire.
Certainly.
Tell us how you met your wonderful wife, Patty. The inside story. Well,
this is more recent. 2007, we actually met online on Match.com.
Oh, okay.
So,
and I won't dare ask what the fishermen use for bait.
Music. I played a song, and that was the hook.
So like the mermaid and the siren and all. So you had a balcony, sort of Juliet style.
A little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. And 6 months later, we were married.
And you swam into his cove. I like to use metaphors. Why not? Okay. So where was your first date?
At McGrath's, right downtown in Salem here.
Oh, wow.
She came over from Newport. She was living in Newport, and I was living in Salem. And so I stood on the street corner downtown, and she pulled up in her fancy little Toyota, and we went to lunch. Then went to Lowe's because she was looking for sod. I don't know why she needed sod, but I think that was a gimmick. But anyway, ended up taking her over to my house to show her where I lived. And I think she was a little nervous because I took her down into the basement, and I think she was a little nervous I had a hatchet or something. But I played her music. Man
strikes again. But
I just played her a song.
You're on your good behavior.
I was.
That day.
Most days I am.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to throw in something for fun. It's nothing to do with music, but if I were running a new reality show in these presidential debates, I would attach every candidate to a polygraph and have a split screen, and the one who gets the most lies wins the Pinocchio Prize.
I like that. I like
Okay.
that idea. That's a good idea.
So anybody watching you, you're welcome to plagiarize this idea and make it into a reality.
I'd like them to all have buttons of where they get their money from as well.
That would be true.
That'd be nice
Yeah.
too.
The other odd idea I have is every candidate for president or any office shall say that I will accomplish 50% of my promises by halfway through my term, or I'll resign in honor of the runner-up. So, you know, it's like, do your thing and get off the pot in a clean way. So,
Well, that
radical
works.
idea 102.
That works as long as Congress is cooperative.
Okay.
And they haven't been very cooperative lately. So.
But I mean, the people in Congress would also have to swear before they run for office that if they don't produce half of what they say, they will have a new congressman or woman replacing them halfway through. That would be a one-year probation period, sort of. You know, we really need to have probation periods for politicians. We don't. It's one of the few jobs around that we don't have a probation period for. Yes, you could not reelect them the next time around, but during their term, there's no way that you could retaliate. I don't think you could even recall a congressman. I'm not sure. Okay. Food for thought, people, public. Okay. So tell us about your style of music. How did you develop that, and some of the folk heroes you had that you...
Mostly, I guess you could say I'm self-taught.
Right.
So, between my friend who got me started on it, and we played together for a few years, played in bars around Salem and Independence, and we just kind of fell into a folk rock sort of sound, I guess. Partly because that's what we liked listening to, partly because I was fairly good at it, and I wrote in that style.
Okay. Tell us how folk and rock join up and converge. How do you make the two marry to each other, sort of?
Well, folk is, I mean, there's a distinct band of folk music. And there's a pretty wide band of rock music. So just softening up the rock a little bit into more of a folksy style. Singing about your family, singing about, you know, sort of Americana type stuff adds the folk flavor to a rockier piece of music.
And you're going to play us some samples of that in a few minutes and all. What are some of the challenges that one finds in trying to master the guitar and learn to do folk music? What are some of the trials and tribulations of your immersion in this field?
Well, most of my trials were with band members. I had several band configurations over the years. And trying to keep everybody happy and copacetic with each other was fairly difficult. Different personalities react differently to different situations. So you get somebody who's constantly complaining about something, and you try to fix that, and somebody else doesn't want you to do it that way. So, yeah, it was a struggle. But
so it means trying to make peace.
Trying to make peace a lot.
It's called dissonance.
Yes.
Emotional dissonance.
Yes.
Point and counterpoint.
Cognitive dissonance works.
Right.
But even musical dissonance works. But the emotional dissonance.
I got to share with you something that you'll probably find fascinating. When I was a little kid, 7, 8, 9 years old, my dad brought me up to the country, and somehow I found myself in the recreation room with a piano. And I had never been alone with a piano before, so I began to tickle the ivory and the keyboard. And of course, every key that you touch is a different note and a different tonality to the ear. And some were more pleasing, and some were less pleasing, dissonant and all. And several years later, I became a teenager and used to use a telephone, and I realized that there's a hidden connection between the piano and the telephone in terms of phoning friends. That is, if I wanted to hear a certain voice with a certain mood, I would dial a certain number and know, almost like you have a predictable key, that I'm going to get this kind of response for this kind of mood. I bet you never thought of the connection like that.
I didn't think of it that way, but you're right.
And you know, and some will sound like a big bam, and you know what? And you will want to avoid them and say, "Delete from my life! No, you're off my telephone up the river list." And you know, so I like to connect different things in our so-called culture and see, you know, these vicarious connections and how they come about. They used to call that systems linkage back in social work school. So I'm trying to practice that a little bit. You know, do you have any questions for me? Because I grew up in the folk music era of Peter, Paul, Mary, Kingston Trio, Ian and Sylvia, Buffy St. Marie.
Yep. Listened to all that when I was younger. As a matter of fact, my friend and I, he has a folk collection of several CDs, and he has put together a couple of radio shows. So we're probably starting May 1st, we're going to submit these shows for broadcasting on KYAQ out of Siletz. So it's over.
Is the Sunday brunch show?
Yes, Sunday brunch is what we're calling it.
What time of day?
It's going to be at 11 in the morning.
Okay. So if any of you have friends out in Newport area, or you want to just take the weekend off and head into Newport between the aquarium and the Yakina Lighthouse and all that stuff, and the beach and all. And you also have good community theater there too. You have.
Yes.
So it's a lovely place for a respite.
Yes.
So that you have an alternative to good old Salem.
Yep. And they have good jazz over there and nice orchestra.
It's about an hour and a half away. And it's not as busy as good old Portland.
No, that's one thing I really like about it is there's no traffic and it's easy to get around, low key.
Yeah, and you can stop off at Lincoln City and get samples in the casino of the money that they give away or whatever. You know, but what do you see as some of the future trends in folk music and rock? What do you see coming before us?
Well,
what's happened in the last 5 to 10 years that
it's
points
gone.
the direction?
It's gone digital. It's all digital.
Acoustic.
You could buy everything 99 cents on iTunes. So it kind of, to me, it takes away from the old school feel of buying a new record album and coming home and opening it up and reading the liner notes while you're listening to the record album. And there was an experience there that kids today will never know. That I don't know. I suppose it's okay for them, but for me, I like that feeling from the old days. But everything's way more accessible now.
True.
And which is nice, but it makes the competition so stiff that trying to market your music is really, really difficult these days, just because the odds are way stacked against you.
Okay.
Especially if you're an independent musician, you don't have a company backing you, throwing lots of money into your music, then you're kind of out there on your own.
Okay.
But it's okay.
Mike, in the time left, I know you also do a little songwriting, right?
Yes, I do lots of songwriting.
Tell us a little bit about the challenges of songwriting and what you write about and how you spin your wheels to make it happen.
Mostly I write from the hip. It's I get an idea. Let's see. One day I had bought a new iron, and I looked on the iron, and there was a tag that said, "Do not iron clothes while wearing." And that struck me.
So you went to a nudist colony, you mean?
No. So that struck me as an odd thing to tell somebody. I mean, to take the iron and do it while your clothes are wearing.
You can flatten someone's ego that way.
Right, yeah. So I wrote a song about that concept of silly things that products tell you, you know, safety precautions.
We can all relate to that. Silliness incarnate.
Yeah, so...
do you have any songs in mind that you're planning to write that you haven't just you haven't gotten down to it yet? You have something on your radar about a future song that you want to write?
No, I don't work that way.
I've never collaborated. Maybe I'll collaborate with you someday.
I just I get an idea and I start penning it out and working.
Okay, here's something for the future. Oregon is known for Lewis and Clark expedition, and the unsung heroine is none other than Sacagawea. I would like to see a play, possibly a musical, The Saga of Sacagawea, and how all those rowdy men looked through her feminine eyes, having to endure them for 2-3 years on the trail back and forth and deal with their shenanigans. So maybe you could write some music that would help expose her inner feelings of what she was repressing. Also, you probably don't know, a lot of people don't know, that her husband, the French trapper, was an alcoholic. He was drunk, and so she gave her new baby to Captain Clark for safeguard, because she thought that in a rage of fit and drunkenness, he might do in the baby, hurt or kill the baby. And that was, so the whole business of baby abuse didn't come just yesterday.
Yeah,
it's long-standing and all.
Yeah, I remember that story.
So any closing words for the musicians to be out there in television land?
If you want to play music, just do it. Don't worry about what people tell you. Don't let them tell you that you can't be a musician. If you want to be, you can do whatever you want, and don't worry about making money. It's not always about that. Sometimes the feeling that you get from the creative process is way more valuable than the money you could make off of it.
I think you're just giving rise to a new song, the Greenback Blues.
I've written a song called the Greenback Blues.
Okay, so try it. Okay, this is Michael Frazier and Lee Coyne wishing you a happy, resilient springtime, and hoping you tune in again to more Culturama episodes, and write us if you have any musicians or artist friends to recommend for the future. Thank you. Bye for now.
All right. Well, if you just heard the interview, B. Lee asked me about the songs that I wrote, and this is the one that I wrote about the gentleman that walks Highway 101. And oddly enough, it's called Walking 101. I see this man most every day, walking alone on 101. 5 miles into town, he turns around. 5 miles back, his day is done. He must make a stop for groceries, one little bag in his hand. I wish I knew the story of this walking man. Maybe he's lost someone so close to his heart he can't breathe. Or maybe it's the exercise his doctor said he'd need. Or something in his past that he's walking from. Only speculation on my part of this walking man.
Seen him in the downpours soak you in a flash. I've seen him in the wind at 50 knots. Seen him with the lightning dancing all around. He's still out walking 101. Yeah, he's still out walking 101. Someday I might pull over, see if he'd like a ride. There must be something that he's hidden deep inside. Or maybe he's eccentric and it's just his way of having fun. After all, he's just a man out walking 101. Seen him in the downpours soak you in a flash. I've seen him in the wind at 50 knots. Seen him with the lightning dancing all around. He's still out walking 101. He's still out walking 101. 101. Walking 101. Walking 101. Well, I think I'll do a song I wrote about the crabbers. We happen to, our house sits up on a bluff and we can see a good section of the ocean. And at nighttime, we'll see the crab boats out there with their lights on. And crabbing's a big industry in Newport. And so anyway, this is kind of about going crabbing. The crabbers head out for the season ahead. Ole, ole, oh. Like stars in the sky on the sea, their lights spread. Ole, ole, oh. And the tossing and turning won't rock them to sleep until their catch calls them home. Then they head back to port in the new light of day. Faces are worn from the wind and the sea. Ole, ole, oh. And there's no place on earth that they'd rather be. Ole, ole, oh. Till the storm from the north kicks up the wind and the ocean builds 30-foot swells. And they're forced to give in, so they haul the traps in. Ole, ole, oh. Ole, ole, oh. When the season is done and they count what they've won. Ole, ole, oh. Well, it's been a good year, but not the best one. Ole, ole, oh. So they dried off the boats for some minor repairs and rest up their weary bones. Then they head out again for the season ahead. Ole, ole, oh. Well, I happened to also in the interview with Lee, I mentioned a friend of mine in college had taught me how to play guitar, and he actually passed away in 1985, and had at that time had written one song. It's called "Queen of My Fantasy." So I play it wherever I go, just to keep it alive. So this is it, "Queen of My Fantasy." Walked into my dream world like she knew just what to do. I'd never been so captivated, though this feeling wasn't new. I don't believe a word was spoken as I fell into her eyes. It wasn't till the show was over I came to realize Casey's in LA, she's the queen of my fantasy. I hope this song will find her so she'll know where to look for me. Queen of my fantasy. I don't know if she'll remember the boy who had a dream about a girl in Salt Lake City who could have been a queen. I hope she hears a song I've written to tell her that I'm fine. And now I know I'm one day closer till I can make her mine. Casey's in LA, she's the queen of my fantasy. I hope this song will find her so she'll know where to look for me. Queen of my fantasy. Casey's in LA, she's the queen of my fantasy. I hope this song will find her so she'll know where to look for me. Queen of my fantasy. Queen of my fantasy. She's my fantasy.